Hey everybody, this is Talkative Carl, back again for another Halloween movie review. This one's gonna be like fairly quickly, but it's something I've been wanting to talk about for at least a couple of years. But other stuff, you know, took precedent. But I figured now is as good a time as any to talk about this, considering it's the Halloween season. I'm reviewing the animated movie Dante's Inferno, based off the video game, which I think was an incredible idea. I kind of wish a lot of uh, games do something like this, like God of War. I think that would be an incredible animation film, at least like either like a long movie, one based in Greek and the other in the Norse stuff. But yeah, even though like Dante's Inferno is pretty heavily influenced by God of War, I still think it did a great job of being its own thing. Also, I mean, the game was created by Vigil Game Company, which eventually got bought out because, or at least THQ or something like that. Because the same people that made another great video game that I thoroughly enjoy, Darksiders franchise. Well, I don't care for much for Darksiders 3 because operates on the same game mechanics as like Dark Souls, which that game mechanic I'm not much of a fan of. Even with Jedi Fallen Order, as much as I love that game mechanic I'm not a fan of. But this I've been telling this to many people. Dante's Inferno is one of those games that definitely deserves a sequel. It should have got a three-parter like a long time ago. Like because based off the Divine Comedy, another great story that I've thoroughly enjoyed reading. I got it on Audible, so I've gone through it at least a few times. But the first game based in hell, the second game should have been based in purgatory with new uh, 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 weapons, just like same way with like God of War. If you're doing something like God of War with a Christian twist on the mythology, uh, each game of God of War has him with different weapons and abilities. So you can cast aside anything he got from Hell and give him some new weapons. And then another third and final installment, him going through heaven, just like the Paradiso arc. And I figured like because the way the game ended, uh, less on like a cliffhanger, having Lucifer being the overarching villain through all three installments. I'm putting it out there, and I'm pretty sure you can leave a comment below. Share this with your friends, and don't forget to hit that notification bell and like. But definitely shout it out, everybody. Tweet it, like bring back uh, Dante's Inferno with a sequel. Give us a sequel to Dante's Inferno, because that game is freaking awesome. I love it. I love it to death. I played it countless of times. Speaking of which, I have the entire walkthrough up on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl. Of course, at the time, it was early on in my streaming days. It wasn't up to snuff as I would probably have liked it. So you might not hear me, or the audio quality wasn't like that. But you should, still thoroughly enjoy like the gameplay, regardless of it. But man, it was fun. It was very much fun. But just a little fact here. about the Divine Comedy and like the people involved in the story. There's a lot of because the author Dante Alighieri has a lot of people involved in. Oh, he's not a lot, but there's like a handful of people involved here where he seems kind of biased because he's an Italian poet, and there's a lot of Greek individuals he just is flipping about or just condemns to hell. This is just like his interpretation of the story. But who knows if he actually like traveled through heaven, hell, and purgatory. I also want to know because Beatrice is like a uh, is a love interest in the story and in the game and in the movie. But in real life, from what I've understood from a historical take, he wasn't really with her. He was like pining for her from afar. He married a entirely different woman, had children with her. But I guess like Beatrice was like a love from afar, or the circumstances wasn't right for them to be together, that kind of thing. But just a little tidbit that I know. But anyway, the animated movie, it was very unique because I never seen this done before. Had 3 different animations and had 7 different directors. Now, as the animations progress, by the end of the movie, I liked them a little less than the previous ones. I think the first 3 animation styles I thoroughly enjoyed, but um, the animation where like Dante has his long flowing hair, I think that one I thoroughly enjoyed more so than any of the others. But the last animation style towards the end, I hated the most because they pretty much made the animation of Dante make him look like like a bulky Hulk, which is kind of not takes me out of the entire movie, but it's just like I did not enjoy that. Uh, you got Graham McTavish as Dante, Vanessa Branch voices Beatrice, Steve Bloom voices Lucifer, Peter Jessup as Virgil, uh, also Mark Hamill as Dante's father, Alighieri. Oh, also got Kevin Michael Richardson as King Minos and Flagellus. Uh, so yeah, so it starts off as I like when not go his own way, but it's like it still maintain what we saw from the game, but it takes certain liberties that the game uh, didn't or couldn't explore thoroughly. But uh, Dante on horseback coming back home from the Third Crusade. In case you are not familiar with the year during the time of the Third Crusade, 1100, the year 1189 through 1192. So this is 3 years of the crusade. Now, see that. So Dante, in real life, was like a poet, but in the animated movie and in the game, he briefly, because he's a warrior of the Crusades, he points out that he always wanted to be a poet, but his father was against it. So he decided to join the join in the military. I believe at the time the Dante was born was like circa 1265, and does it match up with the Third Crusade? Well, he definitely would have been alive after the Third Crusade, but the Fourth Crusade would have been the time when he was like a fairly young adult. Anyway, he gets home and finds the servants and his father are slaughtered and killed, while in the back of the home he sees his wife Beatrice laying on the ground bloodied, and she's dying in his arms. And then as she sees like her soul being attempting to whisk away to heaven, it gets snatched away by the ghost form of Lucifer, uh, who hints at Beatrice losing a bet, uh, confusing the hell out of Dante. He whisks her away to hell while Dante giving chase, cutting down demons in his, or at least damned souls in his path, and uh, he bumps into this large gate that he's trying to open to get inside, and he meets up with Virgil. And in case you don't know who Virgil is, uh, he was an ancient Roman poet of Augustine's period, under the rule of Augustine. Uh, so yeah, someone that Dante always idolized. If you needed like a guide or somebody lend you aid, why not somebody who you admired? But Virgil is just a shade. He's just a guide. He cannot help, as he mentions, cannot help fight your battles. So uh, Dante is pretty much on his own for the most part. But this is part where it gets confusing. Like, these are giant, let's say concrete gates that's, Dante's trying to open. He can't, but it's like it's starting to crack, as it seems at first that he's pulling it open himself, but it's like, okay, he's still human. He shouldn't be able to open it. Lucifer had to open it for him because obviously he's integral into his ultimate machinations, but that wasn't very clear because he should, by and large, should be just locked out. But he goes through the gates and lands on Charon, who says, like, you can't be here. You're not dead yet. I mean, you'll soon be here. Trust and believe you'll soon be here, but not right now. But Dante ain't trying to hear it. He takes one of these scythes, which scythes is always my favorite kind of weapon. He takes one of the demon scythes because unlike in the game where Dante takes the scythe from Death himself, and in the game he ends up killing Death, which is, it's games, so can't think too hard on it, but that shouldn't be like a thing. But technically he still died. Spoiler for the game, by the way. But he takes one of these sides, shoving it in the head of Charon to steer him against these jagged rocks, because Charon is mixed with the boat that harbors souls into hell. And Dante looks upon these shades and sees their life as they died, and and like Virgil points out, like, yeah, these there's more damn souls here than any soul that goes to heaven. And Dante asks, like, just like in the Divine Comedy, Dante asks Virgil questions, that challenges what he thought he knew was right, because of course we don't know what the rules are beyond in the afterlife until we get there. It's like, oh, like the priest said, we were absolved. Oh, you believed him, because like, yeah, that would have been their line of thinking. But of course, yeah, priests of that time would have been corrupt for the most part. So nobody can't absolve you of all sins, but that's the point of like asking for forgiveness, because like Virgil points out, God gave man free will, but Lucifer like to challenge that, because he's in that forked tongue. Like, I only merely introduced sin. It was man who cultivated it and spread it like a disease. And it's like, I think it's like, between this and the Netflix Lucifer TV series, it kind of like points out that, or at least in like supernatural TV series, likes to point out, like, yeah, Lucifer has a forked tongue, but what people like to perceive that he's like constantly lying, technically what will be more accurate is that he points out a very hard truth that you want to, in your mind, and it's kind of like a handicap, where you just want to like perceive it as him just bullshitting you, where he's pointing out things that is tough to hear, that you want it to be a lie, or point out hypocrisy and all these shortcomings. But it's like, I'm not a priest, but it's kind of like, yeah, you acknowledge your kind of wrongdoings. It's the point of like repenting and like, hey, like, I effed up. I gotta make things right while I'm alive. It's time for I still have time to try to make things right. Because by the time you hit the afterlife, whether it's up or down or middle, like, that's, well, depending on what you believe in, purgatory is like a spot where you didn't, because a lot of people like to point out, like, especially like when it comes to atheists, that like, oh, you get to repent, you do all this effed up stuff, but before you die, you repent and God just takes you up. Do you really think that God, even if you don't believe him, but you know that by like the definition of God, he's all knowing, all seeing, that kind of thing, you don't think that he would see through that kind of bullshit? Like, like, oh, he repented, so like, I don't know if I'm God, how I'm supposed to know he is telling the truth or not? It's like, yeah, he wouldn't know if you're being sincere. If you're not, you're going to hell anyway. I was like, you're not gonna pull the wool over my eyes, or whatever facsimile of eyes that God would have. But even if you are sincere about it, that's where purgatory comes into play, where you go through these trials, because at least people in purgatory, or souls in purgatory, have a better shot at heaven than anybody in hell, because that's all she wrote. If you go to hell, that's all she wrote. But if you got purgatory, then you at least have like, a chance to make it to heaven if you go through a trial, that kind, these kind of trials or tasks that you didn't sin enough to earn a spot in hell, but you didn't sin any less to earn your spot in heaven. You just right in that center where it's like, okay, you pretty much in timeout, and you give it some time, and then like, yeah, we'll let you in there because you just shy away of heaven, so you can still like grading on the curve. You still technically passed. But anyway, he goes through limbo to you see, this is probably kind of got me because I don't like seeing things happen to like kids and especially babies. But he goes through these wooded areas where he sees uh, when Dante sees these unbaptized babies who uh, uh, populate limbo for the most part and got like scythe kind of hands and they come at you like a swarm. And it's like, I'm not 100% sure if that's like a fact because this is an interpretation of what Dante Alighieri perceives how the afterlife would be during his period of his life. Because I'm pretty sure he believes that like unbaptized babies will end up like this. I don't want to believe that personally. I just think God has some nuance to where like it's not the baby's fault who whose parents didn't baptize them either right away or not at all, and they somehow end up passing away through any myriad of ways, and they will still go to heaven just by default. Uh, the same thing with you, even if you're like a full-grown adult or an atheist or whatever, how you believe, if you're still like a good person, throughout your life and wasn't like a complete shitbag, you still should earn your spot in heaven. But in limbo, Dante also saw, you know, uh, ancient philosophers and poets like Plato, and Dante also gets like these like flashbacks because hell. Most people have like a false notion that hell is just about the physical torture, but it's mostly the psychological torture that gets you because you are hit with like hard visions of atrocities that you or somebody you're meeting has done. Because you come across this sultan that he fought in during the Crusades, and he killed him in front of his people or family, and it's like Dante's just witnessing all the horrors he wrought, and it's like this is more about saving Dante's soul as much as saving the soul of Beatrice, as you see him like going through these different circles of hell, and he's each one forces him to face that particular sin. He goes through lust, and unlike the game, this is where it deviates. You hear the words of Cleopatra and Anthony, who are bosses in the level of lust in the game, which I kind of uh, am against because because you still see him fight these demon harlots they have, which I gotta say, animated movie and game, the creatures demons are very creatively done. I would never in a million years will come up with this idea to where uh, you got these like these demon women completely naked, but having these you know tendrils coming out of their vagina with a spike at the end, and trying to uh, attack and kill you. And it's like, and Dante's just making short work of these guys. But like, I thought that's probably one of the most creative demons in the game and film. Uh, and then he goes further into gluttony, and this is where you see like Cerberus, not like your typical uh, standard dog with three heads, but just like this grotesque, fleshy thing with mouths for eyes, uh, and just mouths on mouths, and of course it's gluttony, and then you got like all these like fat demon things just constantly consuming anything, any and everything around it. It's just like it is the most grotesque part of the circle. And Dante cut the heart of this beast so he can enter the second circle. But this kind of gives him like a flashback of his father, because he represents like gluttony, like a perfect example of gluttony. Because I'm not sure about the real life Dante, but in the game and movie, Dante had like uh, uh, a big uh, animosity towards his father. It was like a greedy uh, uh, wife and child beater, and like you see him like just mercilessly beat on his wife in front of their son because two gold coins wasn't accounted for that he assumed she stole underneath his nose, and it's like it's harsh. It's harsh to see. But I'm glad they don't shy away from it, because this kind of thing, you think like in modern days, we seen like things like this happen. This probably ran rampant during uh, uh, the periods like this. Uh, and then he goes to the next circle, this next part of greed, where it's like, the gold, instead of like, it's gluttony and then greed. And then you see this like more mechanical space. Oh, I almost forgot. Just like in a game where you get to absolve people, or just you choose between absolving and punishing a soul that's begging for mercy. And I like that aspect, even though like nobody really has like, other than God can really judge a person. But I'm glad you get to see like a brief, summary, a very brief summary of a particular soul where you can choose to absolve them or not. And it felt easier as a little kid when I played this, or in my early teens. But as I got older and I replayed that, a few years back when I started the channel, now it was like, it was a little, when I'm reading through it, it's a little bit um, difficult, because now I'm thinking with my adult brain, where it's not so black and white as it was when I was like younger. But it's like, okay, the circles, I like to absolve as much as like I possibly could, but it's like, that's why it's like up to God to ultimately judge, because he knows ins and outs of everybody's like entire lifespan. And it's like, I don't know, like the circumstances that led up to a particular person to get to this point, because like I want to feel sympathy for him, but like, okay, I want the full context here. I mean, they give you kind of like a context, but it's like, okay, you did kill somebody, but it just seems like self-defense the way it's being told to me. So I'm just going to absolve you, because it's like, okay, you were put in a position that is like, of course, we all have a choice, but it's like there's nuance and it's not that black and white. So it's like, I'm going to give it to him kind of situation. But then you see this moment where like Dante in gluttony meets up with a guy, Kakayo, what is it? Shoot. Uh, Siako, something like that. It was like a man from Dante's uh, village. He died when just after Dante was born, and it's like, I mean, I'm glad like you see like Dante absolves somebody do this stuff because you gotta maintain like the game. You gotta see something like that happen. Because you also see him punish a damsel uh, as an option because they're just that freaking wicked in their life and in death. But it's like, okay, Kakayo, like you get absolved. Like I guess Dante feels for him, but it's like he was just he was only like I'm not sure what the time span is, but if he was just maybe like a year old at the most during the moment when you died, he wouldn't know you, let alone remember you. He's just going off of like just the story itself and sympathy, because like yeah, you probably knew me. I can't remember you. I don't recall you. I was only a baby, and it's like, oh, why would I, you know? But I was like, okay, like sorry, dude. So like, I feel for you. So let me absolve you. Like I don't know you like that, but you got my sympathy, dude. There's no sweat off my bones about it. Because you don't seem like a bad. Because like from Dante's perspective, and just like from my perspective, it's like you don't seem like a bad dude. Because Dante doesn't see gluttony as like a major offense. But you see like through the different levels of the circle, like it goes from the lightest sin from like limbo up until like treachery being like the heaviest sin. Uh, and Lucifer like berates him like, who are you to absolve anybody, in hell? Anybody here deserves, their fate. And like, what about Beatrice? Oh, she's an exception. Like, of course she is. Uh, but Dante meets up with his father, who's at this point like a grotesque pig-like thing with a vagina mouth, with his like gold cross. He wields like a bludgeoning weapon. Like in the game, once I acquired that off of him after I beat him, I use that a lot just for like a barrier purposes. Just like have like multiple offensive things to keep people from like coming at me from any other direction while I focus on a particular enemy. I love that. But clearly, it's like a symbol of the father's greed. Now, of course, he has a golden cross because that's just so gaudy. Uh, to the fullest. That's just so gaudy. So he's fighting his own son, and it's just like I'm pretty sure that's triggering to a lot of people because like not only can you imagine like you're seeing your father in hell, but he's trying to make sure he do everything he can to keep you there because Lucifer promised me 1,000 years of no torture and a bunch of gold if I kill you. And Dante says exactly what we all think. Like, how would you spend this gold? It's like, are you that dumb? Of course, he ends up beating his father and push him into this vat of boiling gold. But I kind of wish they kind of included the final dialogue of the father, like the game, where it's like Dante asks, like, it's like, is this all you have to offer me? It's like, because pretty much like, you're my father. And he's supposed to be, doing every can to help me. Because Beatrice is an innocent person. I'm trying to save her. Like, can you for once be a father and help me? And it's like, I don't know how you guys, if you played this before and you saw that scene where, after you beat the father, that line of dialogue, it's like, part of me likes to think, maybe it's the optimistic part of my brain, likes to think, just because he's kind of like a dig, it seems somewhat on a level of trying to give him some words of wisdom to send him on his way. But I'm not sure. If you remember that dialogue in the game, let me know what is your interpretation on that. But he goes further. I mean, he has a little words with Virgil because like you in hell, like I'm pretty sure it's going to warp your mind, and he's accusing Virgil of being another apparition sent by Lucifer to mess with him. But you know Virgil pretty much like telling him, steal yourself, like I've been set on high. I was like, sorry, this is like so please fucking with me. So they go further into the circle. All the while, and during the lust, you see like a vision of, because Lucifer made a bet with Beatrice that he would make sure that Dante has safe patches back home after the Crusades. Uh, if he was ever unfaithful to you while he was gone, then I get to claim your soul. And she has so much faith in her guy, but unless you find out that, because during the war, it's like, and not that it's like you can't put it all in the war, because people always say like war is hell, and I imagine it is, but it's kind of like a zombie apocalypse. You see what a person really is like at their core, but Dante had like a moment of weakness. It's human nature. I mean, human are flawed like that, but you gotta rise above it or try to fix your mistake. Is what really matters. But he ends up, because one of the guards is beating on this. I think it's like a Pakistani or Israeli, maybe not Israeli, something like a Middle Eastern individual, whoever was like considered like heretics of the time of the Third Crusade during the war, and Dante and Beatrice's brother were, and a bunch of other uh, uh, medieval soldiers were standing guard in this post, and they have a bunch of heretic prisoners, and one of them is getting beat on by one of the soldiers, and this lady begging Dante to put a stop to it, and she offered to have sex with him in order to get that to stop, and because Dante concludes, to like ease his own conscience, like, oh, the priest absolved us of all our sins, like, so it shouldn't be a problem. So he ends up, having sex with this woman and have the guard release the what he thought was the brother, but it was her husband. So it was all kinds of effed up, because now that guy, to seek revenge, somehow finds where Dante's family lived, and very Assassin's Creed like went and slaughtered the servants there and the father and the Beatrice, and it became this whole domino effect. Uh, uh, what was the next? Wrath, which then leads them to the city of Dis, where like Dante and is trying to fight his way through just to save Beatrice, because now she's being like had to honor her end of the bargain, because like Lucifer needed like a pure soul to be his wife, to bear him like heirs, or at least offspring, to carry on his work. And he brings up about how like you got like Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, they all failed, where you would be like the pure soul that I want. You remind me, because that way you remind me of what my station was in heaven. Because Lucifer was like the morning star. He was the brightest of all, and favorite of all of God's angels before his fall. And there was a moment where he's trying to break Beatrice's faith in Dante by showing her images of past stuff, like Christ's crucifixion and all this other horrific stuff man did. And sort of the future, like a moment where it's like the rise in power of Hitler and the atrocities he's gonna do, and she's tried to keep her resolve. It's like, no, man is good. But it's like, I'm gonna question a little bit about, like, because she probably won't understand what Hitler would be, but I don't know if she just understands the full context, or she's just getting part of it from whatever Lucifer would want her to see that would favor his ideology. Because of course he would not show her all the bulk of the world going against Hitler's machinations and putting a stop to his atrocities. Of course, Lucifer wouldn't show her that, because that would prove her right. Uh, 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 Next, in the sixth circle, he goes to the Heretics, and where he meets up with a guy that was a rival to Dante in life, Farinata. He ends up killing him because apparently he was like a complete jackass in life and hasn't changed. Then this is where a big moment here. He goes to the area of suicides, and which personally I don't want to believe that God would, because like God knows. I mean, I might not be the only one who believes this, but don't know how in the minority I'm in with this. But I do not believe that God, in His infinite wisdom, would condemn people who struggling in life, that they would feel like, like gone so low to the point where they would commit suicide, given like whatever circumstances that pushed them to that point. I do not want to believe that God would like abandon them to hell. Yes, I think Old Testament or whatever, I'm pretty sure it's the Old Testament that brings up the fact that, like, I could be wrong, but brings up the fact that, like, committing suicide is a sin. I mean, in general, suicide is considered a sin, but you know, how good a person is in life, and if something pushes them to the point of a mental break where they figured the only way out is suicide, you would not tell that person that, yeah, they're in hell because they they could not throw away a life that God given them. And it's like, you don't understand the full context. God will understand the full context, and I would like to think that He would just still welcome them into heaven, or have some kind of criteria for that, because that just wouldn't be fair. Uh, but who might say it was fair? And it's like, this is God's universe. He set it up the way He wants to set it up. But I'm just saying, like, He would understand the nuances. But he meets up with his mother, who he thought died of the fever when he was a young kid, but it turns out she took her own life, and the father made up a story about the fever, but the constant abuse from the father pushed her into committing suicide. But I guess because she left Dante alone with a guy like that, because she wasn't strong enough, I guess, well, put her in this kind of predicament. But with some words of encouragement from her, about, like, she needs you. You have to do whatever you can to save her. And Dante takes out his cross, absolves her, and she goes to heaven. But I like this segment, just like in the game, to give Dante that reaffirming that what he's doing is the right path. Still yourself. You're doing this. You're doing the right thing. No matter what you're facing, you have to, like, because like it's gonna be hard, but you have to, like, remain true to yourself. Uh, so that's when he goes and uh, uh, during the because during the circle is like like sins against man, God, and uh, 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 man, God, and there's a third one. Oh, and oneself, and the suicide. Duh. But before they get to the suicide, there's like a blood river filled with like people who did harm to others, like a lot of warriors, iconic warriors that we all know, like Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun. I understand Attila the Hun, but Alexander the Great is a little iffy. But considering what he's done, like in Egypt with like the nose on one of the pyramids, and thing with Cleopatra, it is a whole. There's still stuff he's done that probably would land him in hell. But given the fact that during the civilization, there's like had to have like warriors like Alexander and his troops and the life they lived. It's like it's all people are complicated. And different civilizations and periods of life is super complicated, and like there's all part of what happened with like Adam and Eve and the fall of man and yada yada. It's like it's a huge domino effect. That probably the biggest domino effect in like history. But it's up to the discretion of God whether or not one goes directly to hell or one gets to go to heaven. He's the ultimate judge. But it's like depending on the life you live, you know, if this your fate, then it's your fate. But I think it's very different for what suicides are, because Alexander the Great and Attila the Hun committed like a lot of atrocities in their life. They was essentially warmongers, but then you go into this like desert sands of those who committed crimes against God, uh, shed blood or violence in the name of God, and that's where Dante runs into Beatrice's brother, who you find by the end of this uh, committed the ultimate treason, ultimate act of treachery, essentially. But they also committed an act against God, and he tells him that the priest lied to us. Nobody, no one man can absolve you of like all your sins, and uh, he just had like a bitter grudge against uh, Dante. Just like him losing his cool the way he did, and you know, you would think because Beatrice's brother stood up and took, and because he's his friend, and by the end of the day he's still like my brother, and I would I wouldn't hesitate to step in to save my brother's life, and it's like that kind of act should have landed him in heaven. The fact that he essentially took a bullet for this guy, the ultimate bullet for this guy, uh, for his atrocities, but uh, that's the kind of thing I also question in the game. But uh, uh, Dante actually had to, you know, take out his brother and friend. But unlike in the game, where I prefer to see him actually absolve his comrade and brother into heaven, because this is Beast's brother and therefore his brother, not just by brothers in arms, but like family. But you don't get to see this in here, and I like that's one thing I probably don't like the most out of anything. Uh, uh, the animation here is like I said, I mean not the animation, but like the dialogue in a lot of these is very well done. However, I want to point out, I don't know what happened, but the voices, especially towards the end, the voices did not match up with the lips of the animation, which I think was very weird. I don't know what happened. Uh, but um, after Francesco, I think that's the brother's name. After he stops Francesco, he proceeds to go to like the area of fraud, trying to stop the marriage of Lucifer and Beatrice. Still went through, and Beatrice now like a demon because she ate like this little like a fruit thing. I think it's supposed to be some kind of like allegory to like the forbidden fruit of the of Garden of Eden. And I love the design of this because it's pretty much like like a screaming faces that in the shape of a strawberry. Uh, he turns into a fiery demon and proceeds to beat the shit out of Dante for his lust, his greed, his gluttony, his fraud and treachery they committed in life. And she then Dante then shows her the cross that she gave him before he went off on his crusade, and she all of a sudden had like a moment of realization, like my cross, you kept it. Then he proceeds to absolve her, and which turns her back into like a good spirit. And then she proceeds to heal him because he had like a broken arm, and part of his flesh was you know uh like third degree burns and stuff like that. It was hardcore. But then that's when the this angel comes down to retrieve the soul that's supposed to be in heaven. Like, dude, what the freak were you this whole time while she was trapped? Because this is long before, because she was sitting here long before she ate that forbidden fruit and uh, wedded Lucifer. And it's like, you could have jumped in at any time. But I guess it's part of like Dante's thing, or I guess it had to be, he had to absolve her first in order to give him like that angel like a beacon to come down. I don't know. That part was weird. There's always been weird to me. Even in the game, that was weird. Uh, uh, but the angel design, I kind of wish because I don't know if there was actually thing you can look up where you see other designs and the other different animation that didn't see the light of day during the final project. Because in this part, I don't like the animation of this part of of this section, especially like the angel is itself. I want to see like what the other designs look like because I'm pretty sure I probably like it better than I did in this. But if you look up like, I caution you, but if you look up online the uh the I guess theoretical, but just like the realistic depiction of the way it's typically described or drawn in hieroglyphs, hieroglyphs or hieroglyphs, or pictographs or whatever in like ancient books or whatever depicting what angels look like from uh, somebody else's perspective, and they're kind of like, I want to say grotesque, but it's like really tough to look at. That's why like typically angels come in like human form for people to better, because humanity shouldn't be able to see like the true visions of God or angels or demons or Lucifer, because that's like literally part at bare minimum make you lose your mind, or it'll end up killing you because it's like too much for human minds to perceive and understand what they're witnessing. It's too much out there, and it's like, especially like angels and God, the power that irradiates off of them is a lot. uh but the uh I remember one of the angels in the Supernatural TV show mentions how like his real uh, body is one of them has like a head of a he has like a couple of heads. One of them's a head of a lion. It's just kind of like that. It's like they're some angels have like a bunch of eyeballs on with wings. It's like it's all out there. I'm insane. Like look it up if you want to, but just be prepared of what you're about to see. But anyway, now it's getting towards the end where like we're going into the final circle where you think it's gonna be all fire, but the final circle of treachery is a frozen wasteland where you'll see like this giant figure of Lucifer, whose bat-like wings, each flap, cause further, freezing of the area, and he has three heads, two of which are chewing on the souls of uh, two of the history's biggest traitors, Cain from Cain and Abel's story, and Judas, who betrayed Jesus. And he's chewing on them like toothpicks. And so Dante is finally battling out, with this guy. The final boss battle, just to make it through into purgatory to make his way to Beatrice. But he has to stop Lucifer from going into the portal. And so he prays to God for forgiveness. And because of his repenting, causes massive light to refreeze Lucifer back into his prison. And Dante finally makes his way through the portal into purgatory. He rips off the sewn on what's that P word? This patchwork. Uh, and in the game, it turns into a snake, which you hear Lucifer's laughter in the background, hinting at a sequel. But you don't get that here; it just fades to black. But you can still feel like that one's coming. And that's where the movie ends. Where him just Dante narrating uh, the words like neither completely living nor completely dead. So he's making his way to purgatory, which you assume is going to be in the next adventure. But yeah, it's very good. I still love. I give this like a good like a B plus if I would rate it. It's still very good. You can find this on Amazon Prime. Uh, you can watch this free on Amazon Prime. It's very, very well done story. I love the idea of changing the animations, but I guess it's also in part of that's probably why I give it a B plus because there's so many directors involved in this. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 directors involved in this, written by one guy, Brandon Ullman. But it's just like it's too. It feels like it's too many cooks in the kitchen, and part of me feels like maybe if they just focus on maybe one, at the most 2 directors rather than 7, uh, I might you might get something better out of this. I mean, it's already good, but it's like could have been a whole lot better. And but I can still put it as one of the great video games based off movies based off a video game, because I don't think many people put it on the list of great video game movies. Because I put up there along with like the Sonic movies and Detective Pikachu and the Tomb Raider films, the rebooted and like the first 2 Angelina Jolie films. Well, Cradle of Life wasn't really that good as I remember it. Some people still like it, but I think the first Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie and like the rebooted Tomb Raider film based off the rebooted games uh, uh, should be up there as far as like good video game movies. But yeah, and the Chris Pratt Mario movie is to be determined at this point. I don't have high hopes for it, to be honest with you. But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you thought of Dante's Inferno animated movie. If you've seen it recently, but if you haven't, check it out. Then come back. Let me know what you thought. And I will see you guys later. More Halloween movies down the line. And yeah, take care.